Dmitry Grozoubinski is the man to whom we often turn when the befuddlement and bafflement reaches fever pitch on matters international trade. He is the founder of Explain Trade and the author of Why Politicians Lie About Trade, and a trade and negotiations consultant. So he knows about trade, I think we can say. Can you give me an idiot's guide to what these tariffs are, what they do and what it means?
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, James. It's
Hey,
good to be with you, though
always.
normally if I'm with you, that means something's gone horribly wrong somewhere. So that trend is well and truly continuing. So tariffs are a tax. They are a tax on bringing goods that are made somewhere else into the country. So in practice, the way that they work is when a business is bringing stuff across the border, they submit something called an import declaration where they say, hey, here's what we're bringing into the country. And here's how much it's worth at the time it crosses the border before we add things like supermarket markups. And the government has a big list of all the product types in the world and charges a percentage on some products. So it says, okay, you bring in Apple, the tariffs on apples are 10%. You're going to pay a tax to us for doing that of 10% of what this apple's worth.
And I then pass that on to my Apple purchaser, probably.
In most cases, yes. There are like very limited exceptions where like if your margin of profit is so high that you could absorb a 10%
Sure.
tariff, you might not do that just because you want to keep your market share, but that's an exception.
We have I mean, it's almost a cottage industry on the program at the moment, Dmitry, pointing out the futility of trying to work out what is going on in Donald Trump's mind. But what do you think is going on in Donald Trump's mind regarding the introduction of these tariffs?
I mean, it is somewhat futile. The image that pops into my mind is a grenade inside a fireworks factory. But in practice, I think there are a couple of things that are going on. So first of all, he simply likes tariffs as a concept. He likes the idea of them because in his mind and the way that he describes them, he describes them as a tax on foreigners. He believes this is a tax he can introduce that really hurts other people and not Americans. And we can talk about why that's not accurate at all.
I think most people can work it out for themselves.
Yeah, I would hope so. Maybe not people in the White House, but your listeners certainly. Secondly, because he can introduce them without Congress. There are legal quirks in the US system where, unlike almost anything else, he can just do this at the stroke of a pen.
Okay.
Whereas for anything else, you'd have to go through the messy US legislative system with its filibusters and its checks and balances and whatnot. He can just do this stuff. And thirdly, he legitimately believes that countries that sell the US more than the US buys from them are ripping it off in some way.
Is that, I mean, you say he legitimately believes it, but is it a legitimate belief?
No, it's very hard to describe any situation in which American buyers are looking at what's on the market, finding a product in another country that is the best value in their minds, and paying for it as some sort of great scam perpetrated on the world's richest country.
But this could prompt some importers to start manufacturing in the United States of America to avoid the tariff.
So that's certainly his argument. He's basically saying, listen, it's like any other tax. If you disincentivize a behavior, if you make it more expensive to bring stuff in from abroad, more businesses will start up in the US, start making stuff. Businesses from abroad will move some of their manufacturing into the US. That is his argument.
What impact have these tariffs had so far, and it's early days? Therefore, also, what impact do you expect them to have if they stay in place moving forward?
So again, it's this day two of the world's stupidest tariff war. So, but we've already seen a couple of things. First, businesses and investors are like deer in the headlights right now. They are completely paralyzed because, and we saw this a lot during Brexit, even worse than individual tariffs is the uncertainty and the unpredictability. It is very hard to know where to build a factory right now because you don't know how borders are going to work next month, next year, next decade. And so a lot of advisors and a lot of people who are in this space or advising big companies are telling them, listen, just hunker in place and wait until all of the chaos starts to normalize a bit. Don't make any big long-term decisions. So we're seeing that. The stock market, which for a long time simply did not believe that he would lick the hot stove, is now taking that very seriously, and we're seeing huge plunges across US indices. And we are also seeing a plunge in consumer confidence and business confidence and projections of US growth for quarter one. So there are already impacts. A lot of those impacts are about the uncertainty and about what these tariffs might do, but it's the tariffs themselves as well.
Crikey. Do you think he fully understands tariffs?
I try really hard not to speculate
Sure.
what's in a man's head or what's in a man's heart. I think Donald Trump generally operates on this in this space, and he always has, where there is reality and there is what he believes he can sell. And I believe he believes he can sell tariffs as working the way he's describing. Whether he sort of understands on some primal level where someone's explained to him that it probably won't work, I don't know. But he certainly, at least at the moment, believes that this is an argument he can win and a grievance he can address.
And finally, Dmitry, retaliation is inevitable. Retaliatory tariffs.
Absolutely. For a couple of reasons. The biggest one of which is just domestic political. If you punch Mexico in the face, if you punch Canada in the face, the Mexican and Canadian people expect their government to punch back. And you also want to send a message to the US that this stuff has consequences. And I would just say one thing on that, James, if you'll permit me.
Of course.
A lot of the time we talk about this stuff, we often say, well, listen, the US is the bigger economic player here. It can cause more damage to Canada than Canada can cause to the US. And that is absolutely true. But the thing I would always ask people to remember is that pain is not zero sum and it is not asymmetrical. So, for example, US soybean farmers who are about to face tariffs into China, by far the world's biggest import market for their soybeans, are not helped by the fact that Chinese steel exporters are now going to be more locked out of the US market, and in some aggregate economic way, like steel producing in China is more lucrative than soybeans in America, whatever. So you can cause the US pain if you are smart and tactical. You can cause the Republican Party and the Trump administration acute pain if you are targeted. And the fact that they can cause you more pain does not make the people hurting feel any better.
Beautifully put. In fact, Marion writes, this guy is both brilliantly informed and very funny.
Also incredibly handsome.
Well, I don't know if she can hear that on her radio, but she can certainly check that on Catch Up. Dmitry Grozoubinski, founder of Explain Trade, a trade and negotiations consultancy, and author of Why Politicians Lie About Trade, providing an idiot's guide to the latest tariff-related news, in which, if you hadn't noticed, I was playing the role of the idiot.